Gaza is no more. Gaza has been pulverized, it's been obliterated, and that was the Israeli goal.
What happens to these people?
Well, Gazan civilians today have an opportunity after Hamas
No, that's not my
that has
question.
subjugated them
Fleur, you can't-
to rebuild their
Fine,
society.
that wasn't my question.
If I need psychoanalysis, I wouldn't go to a representative of a lunatic state.
You have to understand where normal Finkelstein is in his head, okay? First of all, he doesn't believe in the existence of the State of Israel. So it's very difficult arguing with somebody that doesn't believe he should exist at all. We left in
Your imagination.
Excuse me.
You left.
Keep your
It's your
distance, please.
imagination. The Nazis needed the cover of a war in order to carry out the final solution.
Everything this man talks
Okay,
about
you made your
is
point.
a blood
You made your point.
libel.
I want to ask.
And he's
okay.
having his 5 minutes in the sun
Okay.
because today it's trendy
All right.
to hate Israel and hate Jews.
No.
What's the short answer?
My answer
Doesn't have short answers.
That's correct.
Israel's war on Hezbollah is over for now. The ceasefire ends almost 14 months of fighting and 2 months of a direct and deadly assault by Israel inside Lebanon. President Biden and the US administration pushed to get the deal done before Thanksgiving, and no doubt this is the first good news from the Middle East in a long time. But 170 miles to the south, there's very little to feel grateful about. Israel's war on Hamas continues unabated, and the IDF's conduct is facing intensifying scrutiny. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and sacked Defence Minister Yoav Gallant face ICC arrest warrants for war crimes. Reports by the New York Times and others accuse the IDF of habitually using captured Gazans as human shields. President Trump has assembled a stridently pro-Israel cabinet with little patience for his critics. Many supporters of the Palestinian cause fear that life beyond the war holds precious little cause for optimism and that the very concept of a two-state solution may now be dead. To debate this, I'm joined in the studio by two of the strongest voices on this conflict, both with very opposite positions. Fleur Hassan is the Israel Special Envoy for Trade and Innovation, as well as the former Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem. Finkelstein is a political scientist and pro-Palestine activist, author of the new book, Gaza's Gravediggers, an inquiry into corruption in high places. Well, welcome to both of you. I've never met either of you. I've interviewed you both several times, but it's great to meet you both in person. And I appreciate you prepared to do this. A lot of people in this war period have not wanted to debate with people, especially on the other side. So I appreciate that. Norman, you've got a new book out, and I'll come to that in more detail as we go on. But just talking about where we are right now, we've got this ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. There is no ceasefire yet with Hamas. But where do you think this war now is?
Well, with all due respect, I have to disagree with your characterization of where it began and where it now is. In my opinion, speaking on the basis of what Israeli leaders themselves said after October 7th, this isn't a war against Hamas. This is a war against Gaza. In fact, it's not a war at all. It's a genocide. And in the course of that genocide, we could say, as of now, the best estimates are there are about 42 million tons of rubble in Gaza. It would take about 10 to 15 years to clear out the rubble. And even if the rubble were cleared out, there are no prospects for rebuilding Gaza because Israel will claim that any cement that enters Gaza will be used to build tunnels. And so they'll bar cement as they did after Operation Cast Lead in 2008-9. So where we are now, I would say Gaza is no more. Gaza has been pulverized, it's been obliterated, and that was the Israeli goal from October 7th. As you recall for sure, the statements that immediately came out after October 7th spoke about Amalek, spoke about there not being any civilians in Gaza. The intention was to once and for all liquidate, solve the Gaza question. And in my opinion, they have succeeded in that regard. And the prospects for the people of Gaza, my guess is, and it's pure speculation here, by hook or by crook, they're going to find a way to leave because there is nothing that remains. The estimate is about 60 to 70% of Gaza's infrastructure has been destroyed. The hospitals were targeted, the universities were targeted, obviously homes were targeted. So there is nothing left. And that was the intention. The Gaza Hamas aspect was pretty much a sideshow. So, for example, if you look at the statistics from the Israeli government, less than one Israeli soldier has been killed each day in Gaza.
But
that's not a war.
When you say it's a sideshow, I'm going to come to Fleur for a proper response to that. You say a sideshow, you imply that Israel were going to do this anyway, but they hadn't done this, and everything that they have done, they would say, was a direct response to what was a monstrous act of terrorism. I mean, 1,200 people were killed, nearly 7,000 people were wounded. It's one of the worst attacks of modern times. You know, and as you know, we've debated this many times, but I have always supported Israel's right to defend itself. In fact, I've always believed they had a duty to, given the scale of what happened with 3,000 people coming over a border and just murdering anyone who get their hands on. It's, to me, always been a case of what is a proportionate response, what is acceptable. I personally feel it has gone way too far. And for the reasons that you state, and I'll come to you, Fleur, is that there's nothing left there now. I don't know what people expect to happen. Fleur, let me bring you in. Let me pick up on that point first, and you can get into the rest of what Norman said. But Gaza's just been flattened. I mean, it is, I know people who've been there who just say it is an utter devastation. What happens after this war? I mean, assuming that it ends sooner rather than later, we've seen Israel now end the war with Hezbollah, certainly for the next 60 days. But what happens? Gaza's done, isn't it? I mean, what happens to these people?
Well, no, I actually think they have an incredible opportunity, because in 2005, when Israel left Gaza, in order to give the Palestinian leadership a chance to create maybe the pilot of a Palestinian state in beautiful Mediterranean coastline, they could have turned it into Dubai or Singapore. But instead, when Hamas got in a brutal coup in 2006, what happened is they turned Gaza essentially into a military base. They filled it out with tunnels, 800 kilometers of tunnels. They built under hospitals, they built those tunnels, they built booby traps. They didn't build tunnels under hospitals, they built hospitals on top of tunnels. There's like 30 hospitals in Gaza. In the whole of Israel, there's
but
like
that's
12.
That's 20 years ago, all right?
Well, no, they've spent 20 years turning the whole of Gaza into one booby trap for this Armageddon moment.
But that's not an answer to my question.
The answer is what happens now?
Wait, what happens to 1.9 million people who've been sent to refugee camps that have now been attacked as well? What happens to these people? A lot of their homes are just gone.
To be clear, the refugee camps, there are safe spaces where Hamas also infiltrate, and they put their own people. They use them as human shields, as we know, as has been reported, and they put their people in harm's way.
Where is their safe?
What happens now?
Fleur,
if you ask me where the light is...
Yeah, on that one point you just said, though, where are they supposed to go to be safe?
Well,
right now, where do Gazans go?
Mr. Finkelstein said that we're engaged in a genocide. If we were, why are we asking people to get out of the way?
Let me ask you again. Where can
why
they go?
Are we giving warning? Why are we damaging our own element of surprise? Why are we doing that?
My question was, where should the Gazan civilians go to be safe?
The Gazan civilians today have an opportunity after Hamas
No, that's not my question.
Has subjugated them to rebuild their society.
That wasn't my question. My question is, where can they currently go to be safe?
To the safe spaces that Israel has assigned, where Israel is not attacking.
Where?
Well, it depends where. At one point, they moved them from Rafah. They said it couldn't be done. You can't move 1 million people. We did, with absolutely almost zero casualties. And so it can be done. You can move a population out of the way. Hamas is actively putting them in the way. That is what nobody talks about.
But the other argument,
war crime of Hamas.
Yes, but the other argument is that Israel is indiscriminately attacking everywhere and then saying, you know what, Hamas are there. And because no journalists are allowed in to verify this, because the IDF won't let them, there is no independent way of verifying whether any of that is true.
If we were indiscriminately attacking, why are we asking people to get out of the way? Why are we creating safe zones?
Man.
All of what he's saying,
I will bring you in, Norman.
You have to understand where normal Finkelstein is in his head, OK? First of all, he doesn't believe in the existence of the State of Israel. So it's very difficult arguing somebody that doesn't believe he should exist at all. Secondly, as a Jew, he's got what as a Jew, let me finish my point and then you can interrupt.
Talk about my head.
As a Jew.
Talk about your head.
As a Jew, you know, Norman Finkelstein has got what I describe as the abused wife syndrome. The abused wife that stays with her abusive husband has to justify her staying in three ways. One is saying, it's not all that bad, which is what he says about anti-Semitism. The second is saying, well, they didn't mean it. Anti-Semitism, they didn't really mean to target Jews. And the third way, which is he's actively engaging, is to saying, it's our fault. It's my fault. The wife that says, I provoked him.
All right, I'll come to Norman to respond to that.
I provoked him.
Before I come,
and this is the abuser's abusive
you've made your point and he will respond.
That he is in.
Okay.
The Israeli Jew is the liberated Jew that has left the abusive husband.
Fine. Before I go to Norman to respond to that, which I'm sure he'll want to, the point that you were going to answer, and I made you answer a different one because you raised it, but what happens at the end of this war?
You want to know what I think should happen?
No, what is going to happen?
Well, I believe...
What's the plan? What have Israel got as plans?
Well, I believe that with Trump coming into power in the United States and with a Saudi deal on the table, which has been on the table, and this is one of the reasons that they started the massacre on October 7th to begin with. They understood where the Iranians understood where this was all going. They deployed Hamas and they said, this is the moment now. So I believe that there's a real opportunity for the Gazans, for the good Gazans who want a decent life for themselves and not living a life of terrorism, to rebuild.
How?
Under the maybe civil administration of their own local leaders.
Where do they go and live when all their homes have been destroyed?
With their own local leaders, with Saudis, with Emiratis who know how to build quickly, who have the resources to build quickly. If we really have a consortium of countries, like the Abraham Accord countries, that can get together and rebuild, there is an opportunity.
They're still under Israel control?
I don't think Israel should be controlling them.
So Israel would back off completely?
We have to retain security control so we don't have another massacre.
So you would have control. Okay.
But not administrative control.
Well, you just said you have control.
But eventually we don't have to have any control.
You know what? Eventually it'd be really nice, actually, if Israel had no control of Palestine.
Yes, why did we leave in 2005?
Okay, let me bring
Why did we leave in 2005?
I'll come back to you, Fleur. I'll come back to you. Norman, your chance to respond.
Okay. Number one, totally trivial point. If I need psychoanalysis, I wouldn't go to a representative of a lunatic state. I would go to a rational person. Number two, Israel never left Gaza. That's not my opinion. In 2005, Israel relocated its troops from inside Gaza to the periphery of Gaza. What goes into Gaza? What goes out of Gaza? Who goes into Gaza? Who goes out of Gaza? The airspace, the water, everything was controlled by Israel. The guardian of the Fourth Geneva Convention is the International Committee of the Red Cross. The opinion of the Red Cross from 2006 to the present is that Israel remains the occupying power in Gaza. That's the opinion of the United Nations. It's the opinion of all human rights organizations.
I don't disagree with you about any of that, but let me ask you this, Norman. Straight question.
Now let me
factually
hang on. Let me. Hang on.
I
actually don't disagree with your assessment, right? I do think Israel has exercised a control over the people of Gaza ever since they said they ceded control to a government. But let me ask you one question before you finish your answer, which is this: Hamas. There can be no doubt that Hamas was given billions of dollars, a lot of it encouraged by Netanyahu, given billions of dollars, which they did, in fact, squander, which they did squander to the detriment of their people, which they did by building all these tunnels, right? And which they did in the end when they invaded Israel on October the 7th, they knew absolutely what would happen. And therefore, in that moment, they sentenced to death tens of thousands of their own people. Would you quibble with that?
And don't forget, their leaders are billionaires. Their leaders are billionaires.
I will actually, with all due respect, because I respect the facts, I'll quibble with everything you said. Number one, the money that went into Gaza, mostly from European countries and other international organizations, they monitored where the money went very carefully. They weren't about to endow Hamas. There's no evidence.
How did Hamas build all the tunnels?
I'll tell you.
Well, how did they afford to?
They don't have one penny of accountability.
I'll come to you.
Not one penny of accountability.
I'll come to you to respond.
Okay, allow me.
I will challenge both of you, but don't shout over each other.
No one penny of accountability. He's living in an alternate universe.
European governments and many of the international economic organizations, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, UNCTAD, UN Conference for Trade and Development, they all put out on probably a quarterly basis very precise reports on Gaza. None, and I've read all the reports over 10 or 20 years now, 17 years. None of the reports have claimed that the catastrophe, the economic catastrophe in Gaza, has been caused by Hamas. None. Now, if you claim that you have more expertise in the subject than the IMF and the World Bank and UNCTAD, well, you can believe that. I personally don't believe that. The claim of all of these international respected organizations is the main source, the root cause of the catastrophe in Gaza prior to October 7th. The root cause has been the medieval blockade that Israel imposed on it, and which Human Rights Watch, just in November 2024, a month ago, Human Rights Watch described as, quote, a crime against humanity.
Okay, but how did
that's the problem.
But Norman,
the problem
how did Hamas afford
I will give
to build all these tunnels?
You know, Piers, I never quarrel with facts. I'll give you an honest answer.
How did they afford?
He's going to tell you there's no tunnels in a minute, Piers.
Well, I think the amount of tunnels has been vastly exaggerated, but I'll admit I can't prove that.
Right.
I've talked to civil engineers in Gaza about the possibility Israel claims 450 miles of tunnels. I find that totally incredible.
There are billions of dollars worth of tunnels. You accept that?
I don't know. I'm not a civil engineer.
He wants Hamas to remain in power. That's what you're talking to here.
I'm perfectly willing to discuss. What I don't know, I'm not a civil engineer. I can't answer. What I can say is the following. Let's get back to the question of what's happened in Gaza. You said Israel is in a war with Hamas.
Yes.
So has the other guest in this room.
Yeah.
My name is Fleur.
What is your name?
Fleur.
Fleur. So has Fleur. Let me ask you a simple question, okay? If you're at war with Gaza, why are you shooting children in the skull and in the chest? The New York Times published an article on that, came under a lot of flack because they published that article. They said we can't refute the evidence. We have the x-rays in front of us. They're shooting children in the head, in the skull, and in the chest. If you're engaged in the war in Gaza, why are you killing journalists? Why are you killing medics? Why are you killing UN workers? If you're engaged in the war with Hamas, why is it that Human Rights Watch just this past week put out a report? They tell people where to flee. They say, go to the safe zones. Human Rights Watch says, when the people are directed, they're being shot at the road.
But are you seriously saying, but hang on. Let me respond.
When they get to the safe areas,
I understand. I've already made that point.
Israel drops 2,000-pound bombs on them.
I've made that very point.
Does that sound like a war?
No,
or does that sound like a genocide? What does it sound like?
Well, it's interesting. Okay, let's get into that because it's an interesting part of the debate. It's horrendous that UN workers, journalists, children, women have all been killed. It's horrendous.
Targeted.
Well, okay, they quibble with the word targeted. They say it's collateral damage as they've gone after terrorists.
When you shoot a child,
here's my question, Norman.
When you shoot
Norman,
a child
here's my
in
question.
The skull, that's not collateral damage.
Norman, can you tell me any war where innocent people have not been killed in large numbers?
I'm not talking about innocent people. This is not.
No, he's talking about Hamas terrorists.
This is not collateral damage. This is not even indiscriminate killing. This is very discriminate killing. It's indiscriminate bombing of the entire infrastructure.
If they wanted genocide, though, why don't they just kill everyone in Gaza?
There's a very simple answer.
Maybe you let me answer.
I'm going to come to that.
There's a very simple answer to that question, Piers. Because I know you're not allowed to say it, but since I know the topic very well, take the case of the Nazis. The Nazis needed the cover of a war in order to carry out the final solution. Now, Hitler had plans earlier on, but it required a certain amount of cover, propaganda, and all sorts of other devices in order to carry it out. Gaza is in the news. It's very hard.
Do you believe Israel had a right to defend itself after October the 7th?
Actually, if you want to hear my full answer, I'm not giving you a yes or no.
What's the short answer?
My answer.
He doesn't have short answers.
That's correct. I don't have short answers. I've said it to you before. In my opinion, Israel, here it's not my opinion, I'll quote Giora Eiland, the former head of Israel's National Security Council. Israel created, I'm quoting him now in 2004, he said Gaza is, quote, a huge concentration camp. Israel created a huge concentration camp in Gaza. Israel imposed a medieval blockade on Gaza, which has been characterized as a crime against humanity. Israel periodically went into Gaza on its high-tech killing sprees, what it called operations. I would say Israel created, I think I'm quoting now, the British economist called Gaza a toxic dump. Israel created a situation where you have children.
Yeah.
I understand. How old are your children?
From 31 down to 12. 13.
Okay, fine. Imagine if your child, you're a father, your child was born into what Giora Island called a concentration camp. Your child was left to languish in that concentration
It sounds
camp.
like you're working up a justification. October the
allow
7th.
me-
He's
allow me to
completely
finish.
justifying
Let me-
October 7th,
allow
and
me
maybe
to
if you
finish.
let somebody
Let
get a
me- allow
word
me-
in, I
allow
could
me to-
explain where he's coming
Okay,
from.
allow me to finish.
I do need to bring Fleur in, though.
I need your psychoanalysis.
This is not, yes, you do.
No, but she's a-
You need a psychologist.
I love
She does need to
lunatic-
respond.
I love lunatics. who
If there was
pretend
this
to be
is one-on-one
psychoanalysis.
interview.
Well,
right
she
now.
probably thinks you're a lunatic too, to
Okay,
be fair.
fine. And by October 7th, as you recall, Gaza had disappeared from the international stage.
Yeah.
All the talk was about the Abraham Accords, whether Saudi Arabia. So your child was destined to be born into languishing and die in a concentration camp. Israel created those conditions.
So was it justified?
So
What
my view
happened?
is Israel forfeited its right of self-defense
Okay, interesting.
based on its criminal abuse of the population of Gaza for 20 years.
Okay, but so just to extrapolate that, it was just.
I'm very clear. There's no need for extrapolation. Israel forfeited its right to
I was
self-defense.
about to ask, does that mean then that what happened was justified?
I will stick by my formulation. Israel forfeited its right to self-defense by having.
But what
in
Hamas
New York-
justified by your logic?
Was Hamas justified? If your children were in that situation, I suspect, as a final resort, they might very well have done what happened.
So
you've
then,
gone-
by his logic, there's 100 children in tunnels and dungeons in Gaza right now, taken, innocent people, not soldiers, taken hostage. If it was your child, then it justifies everything by his very logic.
Shooting children
by
in the
his
skull.
very logic,
because there are 100
somebody
children.
takes away your children
All right, let her
in
respond
the
now,
morning.
Norman.
We've heard enough.
Norman, let her
We've
respond.
heard enough
I
of
gave
you,
you a
Mr.
I gave you a long
Finkelstein.
time.
First of all, let's just come back from Gotham.
Well, hang on. Your response to what? Because Norman's gone as far as I've heard him do,
No, but
in
Norman-
effectively saying
Finkelstein
it was a
has said
justified
that it
attack,
was a
and Israel
justified
has
attack.
no right to defend
self-defense.
itself.
But of
correct.
course he's going to say that because he doesn't believe Israel has a right to exist.
Can you
He
show
doesn't
me a-
believe
can
Israel
you
has
show
a
me a
right to
document where I
exist.
said
Could you
that?
let me answer my
I've
question?
written 10 books.
He
Show me
doesn't
where I
believe
said that.
Israel has
Show me
the
where I
right
Has he
to
ever
exist.
said that?
If
Show me where I
Israel,
said
Has he ever said that?
my question is this.
Well, you just said he said that.
Yes,
If
show me
Israel
where I
doesn't
said
have
that.
the right to self-defense,
Show me where I said
then
that.
it doesn't have the right to exist.
Fleur,
If
He's never
Israel
said that.
doesn't
Piers
have
Morgan just
the
asked you a
right to
question.
self-defense, it doesn't have a right to exist.
But you said-
He believes the whole of the country is a settlement.
Right.
He doesn't
Where did I
believe
say
anywhere.
that?
You've said it, you've implied it,
Okay, where
and
have
we've
I
had
said
enough.
that?
If you let me answer the question
Fleur,
now.
yes, I agree.
Let
I'm
me
letting
answer
you
the
answer
question.
the question.
You know,
Where did I say Israel had no right to exist? Show me.
can I answer
I've
the
written
question?
10 books.
I think
to
you should
the
answer
subject.
him because you have said it as a fact.
If you believe that Israel doesn't have the right of self-defense, you are basically saying that Israel doesn't have the right to exist.
No, I never.
Yes, you do.
There's no connection.
So then we
between
can
the two.
exist, but we can't defend ourselves
You can't
after
consi-
people attack
you
us.
can't
And let's just
consi-
go
you
back
can't
in
prevent-
history.
You can't defend
Oh, I'm
yourself
sorry.
against
Yeah, sorry.
concentration camp
If he keeps
inmates.
interrupting me,
You
Well, what
can't
about-
defend
okay.
he
yourself
just had a
against
10-minute
concentration
monologue.
No, I agree.
He's just
Norman,
had a
let her
10-minute
respond.
monologue. Give me a 5-minute
Okay.
monologue, okay?
Okay.
Since the beginning of the establishment of the State of Israel, which he believes that we were the terrible people displacing people. Okay, we were also displaced. Jews were also displaced from Arab lands. And that's just what happened post-war, post-colonization of the world. So let's look. In 47, there was a two-state solution proposed. The Jews said yes. The Arabs said no. It's not that they wanted a state. It's that they didn't want the Jews to have a state. So we declared a state in 48. What happens? All the countries around us come to attack, to create a genocide. It was a miracle that Israel wasn't eliminated in that moment. Move forward. 67. Those territories in which we were attacked, there was no Palestine, there was no Palestinians. It was Jordan and Egypt and Syria and Lebanon that attacked Israel. If they would never have attacked Israel in 67, that land would have remained Arab land. Okay, fast forward 73. Another war that we didn't start. Now, do we not have the right to defend ourselves from destruction?
67.
We didn't start 67. We didn't start 73. We didn't start. Then we go and we say, we crumble onto hope. We hold on to hope. We say, let's do the Oslo Accords. We offered Arafat, and Clinton will say this himself.
He has said
everything they said they wanted. 97% of the West Bank, half of Jerusalem, the lot. And they said no, and they started a bloody intifada in the streets of my city that killed many, many innocent civilians, Jewish and Arab alike. Then we thought, let's try something else. In 2005, let's do unilateral withdrawal. That's what Sharon did. He said, maybe if we actually just leave, they'll have an opportunity. There was never a blockade. The blockade started when Hamas went into power, and they were bringing in, contrabanding missiles in which to attack Israel. That's when a country has to say, we need to defend ourselves. Now, if there's a blockade, don't they have a border with Egypt? Why don't you say a word about Egypt? There's no blockade when it's 3 walls. Where's the 4th wall? It's Egypt. What happened to Egypt? Didn't they have tunnels going in and out of Egypt? In fact, it was Egypt that had a much harsher border than Israel. We had 20,000 people coming in to work.
Okay, let me ask you a question.
So what concentration camp has... Tell me something. What concentration camp has a country club? What concentration camp has a country club?
No, I have a different question.
Giora Island.
concentration.
Island.
Yes, Giora Island thinks we should keep northern Gaza. That's what he thinks. So now you're quoting him?
Why did Giora Island call it a huge concentration camp? Why? 2004.
I don't speak for him.
Hey, you could just Google
2004?
it. Yes.
We left in 2005.
Right. He called Gaza in 2004 a huge concentration camp.
Let me ask you, Fleur.
So we left in 2004.
Fleur, let me ask you.
We never left.
We left in 2005.
Your imagination,
Excuse me,
you left.
Keep your
in your
distance,
imagination,
please.
you
so
left.
You understand
According to the International Committee of the Red Cross, you didn't leave.
Yes, we know how neutral they are.
According to Human Rights Watch, you didn't leave.
We know how neutral they are.
According to Amnesty International,
we know how neutral.
Everybody's an anti-Semite.
No, but a lot of people. No.
Let me ask you a question.
I want to just answer something.
Let me
just
get a timeout. No, I want to ask you a question, which is this. There can be no doubt that even if Israel says we unilaterally pulled out in 2005 and withdrew troops and so on to the border or whatever, there's no doubt that Israel continued to exercise a form of occupying control. And we saw that very clearly after October the 7th, when Israel was, at the flick of a switch, able to turn off the supplies of water, of electricity.
Why didn't they develop their own water infrastructure?
No, but here's my question for you, Fleur.
Why didn't they use the money to develop their own electricity?
Here's my question for you.
Why?
Here's my question for you. Given that Israel had that power, you can dispute the word occupation, but they had a control over the people of Gaza, the Palestinians, which I don't think they should have had. What gives Israel the right to exercise that kind of power over the people of Gaza?
It wasn't over the people of Gaza. It
Well,
was
it was.
a terrorist entity that has in its foundational charter the destruction of the whole of Israel.
And you gave them control.
At least
no, we didn't give them
agree
control. We gave the Palestinian Authority control.
Are you saying all Gazans are Hamas?
No, we gave the Palestinian Authority control. And then the year later, they had elections pushed by the American government at the time. And then Hamas won that election and then took over in a brutal coup, which, by the way, do you know how many of the PA they killed? This is their own civil war going on.
Listen, I think Hamas,
that's also Israel's fault.
I think Hamas are a despicable...
Everything is Israel's fault.
Fleur?
You are basically practicing the bigotry of low expectation for the Gazans and the Palestinians.
All right, let me...
He's saying that the Palestinian leadership has no responsibility. Zero responsibility.
Hamas is a brutal terrorist organization, okay?
Yes, it is.
So that explains why Israel prohibited chocolate from entering Gaza. That's why Israel prohibited baby chicks
But I don't agree with any of
from
this.
Gaza.
I agree with you.
That's why
He's twisting the reality.
Actually, that is the reality.
It's not.
Israel was doing that.
It's
Israel
not,
produced
Piers.
such
They
a
were
long-
restricting
such-
building materials
Israel-
that they knew they were using.
It wasn't all they were restricting. Let me ask you, listen, I want to bring things forward.
Piers, we
Hang
finally
on.
agree on more than we disagree. I'm glad about
Listen,
that.
you'd be surprised. Honestly, I have a lot of sympathy for the plight of the Palestinians, and I have sympathy
So do
for
I.
Israel to what happened on
I
October
have
7th.
a lot of sympathy
Okay,
for the Palestinians
let me-
because they've always had terrible leadership.
Fine. You know what I think? Palestinians should be entitled to the exact same human rights as you
They should
and
be
me.
entitled to their own
And they're not.
self-determination.
Yeah.
Well, why didn't they do that? Why didn't they take one of the pieces
I
that was
agree with-
offered?
I-
Why did they
May
not
I-
self-determine?
Well, I agree.
Do you know why?
I agree,
Piers?
I agree.
Do you know
May I-
why, Piers?
may I answer
Because
that
they've
question?
never
My view-
taken
May I answer that?
responsibility.
Yes, but
because the
okay,
whole world,
stop talking for a moment,
the whole
Fleur.
world has taken
Fleur,
all
my
responsibility
view is
away
this.
from the leadership.
My view is a bigger view, which is that right behind all this is Iran.
Absolutely.
That Iran's tentacles have
Absolutely.
been fueling Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, and that
Absolutely.
is the core problem in the region.
may-
In Norman
Okay.
Finkelstein world, Islamism is not a problem. Political Islam is
let
not a
Norman
problem.
respond now.
In his world, that's not a problem.
It's a very simple answer. There are called 4 or 5 final status questions bearing on resolving the conflict.
Yeah.
Jerusalem, settlements, borders, refugees. Those are the main issues. Under international law, the settlements are illegal. Each and every one. I noticed yesterday when I was watching your latest program, you referred to the building of new settlements as being appalling. No, under international law, confirmed in the July decision of the International Court of Justice, all the settlements are illegal. Under the plans that Ehud Barak offered in the year 2000, and then later under Ehud Olmert, Israel wanted to keep 80% of the settlements in place. It wanted to keep all the settlement blocks in place. The question of borders, Israel's position has been, excuse me, it will not return to the June 1967 border. That's in breach of international law.
Okay.
Israel says it will not leave East Jerusalem. East Jerusalem is occupied Palestinian territory. It belongs to the Palestinian people. Very simple, very simple. I hope everybody will listen.
Who are we occupying Jerusalem
okay.
from? It was Jordanian before
Okay.
67.
I'm not interested
No,
in
you're
your
talking
opinion.
about law.
Yes,
He's wrong
exactly.
in law.
That's
But you
why-
cannot dispute
It
on that.
was
Hang on,
48.
Fleur, hang on.
48 to
International Court of
67.
Justice.
There's
Hang on.
never been Palestinian.
Okay.
Do you dispute?
land.
Okay, on one
I
point,
dispute
Fleur,
about everything.
we can argue about the
Yes.
hang on. We can argue about the history of the settlements. Okay, what I don't think anyone can argue, Israeli or Palestinian, since the start of this war on October the 7th, 8th, is that the aggressive expansion of settlements on the West Bank by Israelis since the start of this war, in my estimation, has not just been outrageous. I think it actually constitutes an indisputable war crime. What are they doing?
Do you know? Have you ever read Oslo?
I'm
No.
very aware
Okay,
of it.
So let me
I've
tell
actually
you.
interviewed.
So let me tell you what Oslo.
Why are you assuming
was-
things?
I'm
I ask you
asking
questions.
you. I'm asking you a question because when you talk about it, you don't understand what was actually.
I
advanced.
I've literally,
understand.
sorry,
Now-
sorry.
I think he understands.
I've literally specifically asked you about
I'm going to answer.
the aggressive expansion of settlements since October the 7th. It is indefensible, it is illegal, and in my estimation, it is a war crime. Now, we
is
know
no-
that's happening
there's no
because we
war
can see
crime.
it. We can
There's
see
no
it.
occupation.
What we can't see in Gaza
It is
is anything
all-
because the journalists aren't allowed in.
There's no. Yes, and if
Remember-
the journalists were allowed in
remember-
and they got killed, you'd say Israel's killing journalists. So you can't win, can you?
What do you think of the aggressive expansion of
I wanna
settlements
just-
on the West Bank since the war started?
I reject the premise of that, and I'll tell you why.
But you think it's fine?
Let me ask you a question.
Do you support
But
the
she said
expansion?
there's-
I've had Jewish
I've
guests
asked-
who have
She said
condemned
there's
it.
no
I've asked-
occupation.
There's no occupation.
She said there's no
because at
occupation.
beginning-
Do you think these expansions are fine?
I want to answer the
Are
question.
they justified?
I want to answer the
Well, yes or
question.
no?
Oslo.
Give me a yes or no.
Split.
I'm not interested in Oslo.
Oslo split. No, because
I'm
the whole premise of
I'm
your
asking you a simple question, Fleur.
You,
Has the expansion of settlements in the West Bank since the start of this war been justified, yes or no?
94%
Yes or no?
of Palestinians
Yes or no?
are living under their own
Yes or no,
autonomy
Fleur?
in Judea
Yes or
and
no?
Samaria.
Is it justified?
We're What do you mean?
Is it justified?
Of course, we're justified. We are building communities. There are communities
You're
in Judea and
forcing
Samaria.
people out of their homes.
Nobody's been forced out of their
illegally.
homes. Have you ever looked at Area C?
International law says you're breaking the law.
There's no homes. There's desert. It's the Judean desert where there's settlements.
It's very interesting because, OK, let me come back to Norman.
What are you
Let me
talking
come
about?
back to
Do you
Norman.
think people are
would
getting
just say-
kicked out of
You know what,
Okay.
Norman? Here's my thing for you, which
Yeah.
you're going to probably like me saying this, because I've had guests from the Israeli side, and when I've had that very point, that question, they have actually very quickly said, I think it's wrong, right? And I respect that completely. I've got to say, Fleur, your total refusal to accept anything in terms of the settlements since October 7th on the West Bank is
let me
wrong.
ask you a question.
I just find it
Why
outrageous.
was there terrorism before 1967?
I'm not going back to
If
67.
all of, no, I am.
I'm talking about the
because
last year.
Because you're talking about territory that
These
was
settlements expansions in the
legitimately.
last 15
You're
months have
talking
been
about
totally wrong.
territory that was legitimately conquered after a war we didn't start
All right.
in 67.
All right.
So let me ask you a question. Do you think that when somebody aggressively starts a war, they should never pay a price for that?
No, but I think you should be honest about what the
They
price...
should never pay a
you
price?
You should be... Oh, no, of course they should.
Should they? So what's the price they should
No,
pay?
that's the
For
question
having
I've been
attacked?
asking for the last year.
Jordan attacked
That's the question
Israel.
I've been asking
the
for the last
territory
year.
was Jordanian. And let me
All right.
tell you something.
All right.
After the war, they said, keep them.
Fine, I'm going to Norman for a response. Here's the thing, Norman. We agree about more than you may realise, and I do with you as well in certain areas, and disagree in others, right? So I don't come at this from an ideological, I'm with one side or the other. But I do find anyone who attempts to defend the expansion of settlements in the way that we've seen, I just think they're so far one-sided, they can't see the wood for the trees out there. My big issue with Gaza is not that your characterisation is necessarily wrong, it's that we as Western media don't know because we're not allowed in there. And my big problem with the IDF, and I'll get a response from you, Fleur, on this, is the IDF's refusal to let independent Western journalists in to verify what they're doing and to report fairly and freely, I think is very telling and increasingly damning.
Okay, Piers, I listened to you yesterday's program when you had Katie Halper on and Alan Dershowitz and John Kornakis and Matt Kennard.
Yeah.
And that point you made yesterday, which you're reiterating today, I'd like to address it very directly.
Yeah.
You say the problem is that Israel is, or a problem is that Israel isn't admitting journalists.
Yeah.
And you correctly said it's fair for a fair-minded person to infer from that fact.
Yeah, so they're hiding something.
They're excellent.
Yeah.
They're hiding something.
No question.
But that's only half the picture. The other half of the picture, which I hope your listeners will pay attention to, the other half of the picture is this. Since Israel imposed the blockade on Gaza, it's been a basket case, an economic basket case. And all these international organizations have had to come in. Save the Children, World Food Program, CARE, UNESCO, UNICEF. They all have field operations there. They all know the lay of the land. They're all still there since October 7th. Now, when South Africa submitted its application to the International Court of Justice alleging that Israel was in breach of the Genocide Convention, who did it cite? It cited all of these organizations. It would be better if we had journalists there, but really at this point, journalistic coverage would be superfluous. We have all the respect.
Well, it's never superfluous.
Okay, I will say superfluous meaning we have all of these international respected organizations, many of them headed by Americans, like Agency for International Development.
I get
when
your
they
point.
charge, when they all charge that Israel is using starvation.
We're running low on time. I just want to hang on.
That Israel is using starvation as a
Norman,
weapon.
we have about 8 minutes left.
I just want to answer that.
Fleur.
The Special Advisor for Prevention
Quickly,
of Genocide yesterday for the UN
Yep.
was sacked. Why? Because she said that what's happening in Gaza did not meet the definition of genocide.
Yeah.
This is the Special Advisor for Prevention of Genocide.
Yeah.
What he is talking about is a blood libel that Jews have suffered for thousands of years. And what's happening today, that the little blood libel that used to be, oh, Jews are killing Christian children for making the bread, and all of that today, as the collective country, the Jewish country, now today we face the same blood libels, but in big.
Okay.
That's exactly what's
Listen,
happening.
we have a few minutes.
Genocide
Okay,
is a
Fleur.
blood libel.
Fleur.
Apartheid is a blood libel. libel. Everything this man talks about
you made your point.
is a blood
You made your point.
libel.
I want to ask...
And he's having his 5 minutes in the sun because today it's trendy to hate Israel and hate Jews.
Okay.
But it'll be over because we've survived worse than this.
I think to interrupt you. I want to ask, Norman, just about Donald Trump. He's the new president of the United States. He's packed his cabinet with very pro-Israeli people. That's no great secret. He makes no secret of being very pro-Israeli. What does that mean, do you think, for this war? I mean, on one level, it may bring an end to the war faster, which would be a good thing for everybody. But what does it mean going forward? I mean, my big argument with Israel, I've seen no coherent plan for life after the war. And I've been very cynical about Netanyahu, that he's facing corruption charges the moment this is over. He's also, there's a big report out today from Israel, holding his government to account for the failures of allowing October the 7th to happen on their watch. There'll be accountability for that. There's no great incentive for him to end this, but Trump may want him to end it quickly, I suspect. But what happens then? I mean, let's just be big picture here. What is going to happen, do you think?
Well, I hate to be a bearer of bad news. And I've been criticized on that score by people who normally I would count as my allies. But as I said, I think Gaza is no more.
Just gone. What will happen to the people?
I think by hook or by crook, they're going to have to figure out a way to leave.
Well, they'll go into neighboring Arab countries.
Oh, they won't accept them, don't worry.
I don't know what's going to happen.
Nobody's accepting.
But as you know, Piers, in the modern world, right now, there are 2.5 million Syrians in Turkey. There are about 1.5 million Syrians in Lebanon. There are large population movements. I don't want to go into that area, first of all, because it's speculative. And second of all, it seems to me it's a distraction from what we should be focusing on now. And what we should be focusing on now is what happened, who is accountable for it, because that's one part of historical justice.
Before I go to Fleur for a response, just very quickly, because we are literally into the last 5 minutes now, should Hamas have any form of power in any government after this war?
Piers, I've answered that question to you before, but I'll answer it again. I will be succinct. If Hamas, by killing 1,200 people on October 7th, disqualified itself from participating in any future in the resolution of the conflict, then Israel, by a factor of maybe 20 times more, has disqualified itself. And we have to add, it's not just the state of Israel, it's the entire population of Israel, which gets more and more enthusiastic and relishes more and more each time a massacre unfolds in Gaza.
But we also saw hang on that. We also saw scenes of widespread jubilation when the hostages were dragged through the streets in Gaza from a lot of Palestinians. The idea that it's just Hamas members who have a view of an anti-Jewish sentiment. We saw it with our own eyes.
He is assigning a cult of death to the wrong side. He is assigning a cult of death to Israel. Israel is a cult of life.
Let me ask you a question.
Israel
Fleur.
is.
Let me ask you, Fleur.
I have 4 children.
Let me ask you.
I have 4 children, and they come home singing songs. One day we'll have peace. And you know what they teach them in the Palestinian? Let me finish the very rude. He's not let me answer
any question. They also sing death to the Arabs.
That's not true.
Even when
you
they go
do
to
not live in Israel.
Countries,
You have not been to Israel. And I don't know how long.
They sing death to the Arabs.
He's wrong.
Even in Amsterdam, they sing death to the Arabs. In fact, even in Amsterdam, they sang, you know why there are no more schools
the abused
in Gaza?
wife, he's justifying
because there are
the
no
pogrom.
more children in Gaza.
The abused wife is justifying
That's what they were chanting
in
Amsterdam.
He's justifying the pogrom, the abused wife.
Life.
Abused wife syndrome. Justifying the pogrom.
Israel has a cult of life for Jews.
That's not true. And the 20% of Arabs who live, and 20% of Arab citizens that live in peace in Israel, that prosper in Israel, that are in every single strata of society in Israel. You know who the best educated people in Israel are? Christian Arab women. And that's Israel. We celebrate diversity. Everybody gets opportunities, including our Muslim, our Druze, and our Christian population. He is living in a world that doesn't exist and is assigning everything that is wrong with Hamas to... Now, let me just finish with something. This is Israel Khania, who we killed, thankfully, a billionaire, the guy who obviously followed the accounting of Hamas, yes. The blood of women, children, and elderly, we're the ones that need this blood. So it awakens within us the revolutionary spirit. This is the guy who stole billions from his own people and lived like a king in Doha. Now, I think what both of you get wrong is that this is not a territorial conflict. This is an ideological conflict because Hamas don't want a two-state solution. And unfortunately, the PA have rejected every two-state solution proposed
So what
to them
happens at the end
from
of this war?
1947.
So what happens at the end of the war?
There is no territorial solution because this is not a territorial
So what will
conflict. I pray that the Abraham Accords and that the wider peace in the region will bring the Palestinians to the point that they understand that the only way forward is to negotiate with Israel. Not to go this way or that way and not to kill Israelis, but to negotiate with Israel. Israel is a country that I'm so proud of my country. 1948, nobody gave us anything. We've been fighting wars incessantly. We've built a technological superpower. We are curing cancer. We are curing climate issues.
You know what we need to cure for?
Well, we have more Nobel Prizes per capita than anybody else, including Arab Israelis.
You know what we need a cure for?
Prosper in
You know
this
what we need a
country.
cure for?
Killing Arab children.
We need a cure. No, we need a cure for a 75-year conflict.
We do.
And you know what? I'm
pray for
reminded
that
again.
cure every
I'm
day.
reminded again of a conflict in Northern Ireland.
Yes.
Between implacable enemies who killed each
Yes.
other for
Piers?
many decades, and they eventually got leaders who were able to barrel through all that and reach
Piers,
peace.
I was
and that's what we need.
Piers, I was deputy mayor of Jerusalem for 6 years. All I did was build bridges between the 40% Muslim population and the Jewish population.
I've got to leave it there.
And they have prospered
Fleur, I have to leave it there. Fleur and Norman, thank you. Listen, I appreciate you coming together. I know it's passionate views on both sides, but I do appreciate you agreeing to do this debate. I always learn things when smart people debate these things, all right?
Okay,
So,
just one last word, if you don't mind.
very quickly.
Okay. I was supposed to debate Benny Morris at Oxford. He said he won't debate me. I was then supposed to debate Ehud Olmert at Oxford this week. That's why I came. He said he wouldn't debate me. So I appreciate the fact that Fleur came.
Yeah.
I don't think she fared very well.
Well, that's
All right.
true, but let me
You know
tell
what?
you.
No, I'm done.
He will
that's
refuse.
it.
He refuses to debate
right.
Mossab Youssef Hassan.
You know what?
He refused to debate him tomorrow.
You know what?
You know.
You agreed
Piers,
to
why
debate him.
don't you-
He agreed
why
to
don't you
debate
invite
you.
Piers,
And the debate
Piers, can I ask you
is
to
now
invite Mossab
completed.
to debate him on your show?
The beauty of my show
Then
is
Mossab
we get
debate-
people on and they do debate.
Piers,
I've got to leave it there,
invite
Fleur.
Mossab to debate him on your
All right.
show. He will refuse.
We will decide who we get on
I
our
don't
show.
debate
But I'm leaving it there, Norman.
Yeah, there you
Norman,
go.
I'm going to
Mossab.
leave it.
Mossab.
Norman, if you want another
Now
plug
he's
for your
calling
book,
me a psychopath.
we've got to leave it there. I want to leave with a mention.
Debate Mossab. Debate Mossab.
Guys,
I don't debate
continue it out the back.
Any exception for you.
Mossab.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Norman Finkelstein, the author of Gaza's Gravediggers, an inquiry into corruption in high places. Thank you.
you.
Good to see you. Good to finally meet you. Fleur Hassan, great to see you in person. I enjoyed the debate very much. Thank you.